thank you to all of you for being here, sharing with us this hour. We are very happy to see here people we've met before and some colleagues from our research group. So we are going to start sharing our story on how engineering lecturers made semantics their own. So the story starts at the School of Telecommunication Systems in the Polytechnic University of Madrid. We think that the context is very important because in the Polytechnic, this is just one of the schools in the Polytechnic. There are about 20, and all of them are in engineering. So in particular, in our school, in the School of Telecommunication Systems, there are 4 degrees in telecommunications, telematics, electronics, sound and image, telecommunications, 2 PhD programs, also in engineering, in telecommunications, and 4 master degrees, the same. Always we are talking about the context in engineering. As for the departments, that's the same. All our departments are in engineering, physics, maths. So this is just for you to have an idea that the Department of Linguistics is sort of different. The department is transversal to all the Polytechnic University, and we work in what we call sections. In every school, there is one section of the Department of Linguistics. And what we do is mostly, but not exclusively, teaching our students communication skills both in Spanish and in English. So I've lived and shared my life with my engineering colleagues for 22 to 23 years now. And for the last 5 to 8 years, I attended conversations or participated in them most of them very informal, but some of them more formal, about the challenges we have, the new challenges we have in teaching in higher education with the advent of all these new applications and the administrative load we have to deal with. And also about the, let's say, quality of our students. Some colleagues say that the students that chose engineering in the past used to be different, more prepared. Some teachers blame on the students because they feel they are not ready to study an engineering. They lack motivation, and to sum up, that they are not the right kind of students. So these comments reminded me very much of what I had read in Clarence's Turning Access into Success. So in the past, Tom and I had collaborated in the same school, in the same context, with our engineering teachings, but in a different framework, because in that occasion we were working in English as a medium of instruction. We worked with 2 of our colleagues. We chose 2 colleagues who were teaching in different situations. One in a general course of telecommunications for different degrees, and the other one very specialized. So in that occasion, what we did was using the semantics dimension to compare their lectures and how they transmitted their knowledge in those 2 contexts. On that occasion, that was a very descriptive work, comparative, but we didn't do any intervention. So on that occasion, that was our piece of research. So I thought that we could use the semantics dimension. So that this time we could try to carry out an intervention with our teachers based on specific concerns, but realistic concerns of 3 of my colleagues who are praised to be very good teachers in the school. So we asked them about the specific concerns they had when teaching their engineering students. And we obtained answers like, students may not be sufficiently familiar with the terminology. I am not sure if I can explain the concept and formula clear enough, and if the students fully understand what I mean. Or I think I am more confident in what relates knowing the contents, but I am not so sure about the best way to explain them. So we told them about the LCT framework, and we told them that learning about one of the dimensions in LCT, we thought they could have the opportunity to observe, to reflect, and to study, and eventually to change parts of their teaching, their units, or their curriculum. They agreed, and we programmed the intervention. So that was in 7 steps. First, we asked our lecturers to choose one session or one unit or one part of a session they wanted to analyze. And we asked them to complete a form where they would tell us about the unit they have chosen, or the content unit they have chosen. The degree program, the module, the topic, the reasons for choosing the topic, previous experience on teaching the topic, or expected problems. We are going to see a summary of their answers. So, by the way, we have permission to use their real names. So, if I can make it a bit bigger. All right. So first, Juana chose a topic in network access level in the module networks and telecommunication services. This lesson was a bit special because it is not taught in our engineering in our telecommunications engineering school, but in our neighboring geospatial information engineering, and it is taught in the 3rd year. She chose it because that was the first topic she would teach, and she wanted to motivate the students. Nico chose a subject in the 1st year of our students in telecommunications. This is a subject common to the 4 degrees, so it is, let's say, basic to all the degrees. It is analysis of resistive circuits in the subject circuit analysis 1. He chose it because he considers this topic fundamental for the development of the rest of the course. And finally, Ruben chose vibrations in solids in the Masters of Acoustical Engineering in the module of acoustic insulation. His concern was if this formula or processes he explains are very hard for his students and probably boring, in his own words. So we asked our teachers, after completing this form, to video record their lessons with the transcription, with the corresponding transcription, and after recording it, to devote some time to observe if they have achieved the aims they had for teaching that unit. So the lecturers did the reflection, answered to a couple of questions connected with their teaching, and we are in stage 4. We arranged a 1-hour session with myself and Tom online, where mostly Tom, who is more experienced in teacher training, told them about legitimation code theory in general and the semantics dimension in particular. He went through the translation devices. He spent sometimes, talking about the translation devices in 4 levels for semantic gravity and semantic density. Of course, he explained semantic gravity and semantic density, and he explained the idea of semantic waves. So by the end of this session, we asked our teachers to go back to their recordings and to analyze their own teaching again, but this time from the point of view of the semantics dimension. There was a second meeting later on, a couple of weeks, 3 weeks later, where we shared, we would be working in parallel analyzing the 3 sessions, the linguist part, Tom and myself. And the aim of this second session was to share what we had observed in the lessons and to discuss our views and to arrive to some conclusions. There is a last step in the program, but what we are going to share with you today are the results from this second meeting where the engineers and we shared our analysis. So the first case was Juana. If you remember, Juana was teaching for students in the 3rd year, but in geodesy. Juana put directly the transcription or copied the transcription directly into an Excel, as you can see here. So the transcript is, or the content units are not sentences, but so they seem a bit choppy if you see them. Then she analyzed semantic gravity in column D and semantic density in column E. To do so,
Irina,
yes.
What she broke up the transcription into what?
Well, this is exactly the transcription that she obtained from
yeah, but why? So if she's going to code something, what is she coding? I mean, how's this been? Because I never ever break up a transcript or writing into anything before analyzing it.
Okay, what she's coding is these pieces of speech.
Distinct parts. So somebody speaking, somebody speaking, somebody speaking.
Yeah, she herself speaking.
Okay. Oh, okay.
This is the transcription of her lecture. Well, this is part of the transcription
I get
of her
that.
lecture.
I'm trying to figure out if she's going to analyze line by line. What are the lines?
Yes. Because not all the lines. What she did was considering the same level. She numbered the levels, or she numbered semantic gravity and semantic density from 1 to 4. 1 being minus minus and 4 being plus plus.
No, sorry. I'm still asking this. I'm still asking us the same question, which is, what did she? I'm looking at the transcript here. It's been broken up into parts. I'm not quite sure what's breaking them up. So, like, if you're going to analyze each line, what is a line?
The line is when you receive the transcriptions from Teams.
Yeah.
Teams gives you the transcription in these little pieces.
Right, but does that mean that she then took that arbitrary unit and
she took that and put it as it was on an Excel? So
right.
she didn't put the pieces together to have sentences or other
right. The reason I'm asking is because I'm often asked, should I break? People sometimes, particularly linguists, will ask, should I break up a transcript into clauses or sentences? And I always say that codes never follow grammatical units. They don't follow linguistic units. They just change whenever they need to change, or whenever the agent changes them. So I was just trying to figure out
in fact,
why she's breaking it up. That's all.
Yeah, the format is very choppy, but in fact, what she did is, if I understand it well, what you are saying precisely, because she only numbers, if you go to column D and E, semantic gravity and semantic density, she only changes numbers from time to time. So she's really assigning numbers once she considers she has finished with a unit. more or less. So, for example, this 4, which corresponds to semantic gravity here, which is semantic gravity plus plus, remains the same until she changes the 4 by a 3 or a 2 or whatever, some lines later. Or in semantic density, she uses 1 here because she considers the previous and the next are ones.
Okay, good. That's great. Yeah, I was a bit concerned that she was using some random, arbitrary, just breaking up of the discourse. No. Okay, cool. That's awesome.
In fact, we are going to confirm that she did it very, correctly, as we did, as we analyzed it ourselves. So, do you have any? Did I answer your question?
Oh yeah. Excellent.
All right. Okay, so after analyzing, well, this is just an example of her analysis. Of course, it goes on for lines and lines and lines. And what she obtained, she drew the semantic waves. When we saw the her semantic waves resulting from the analysis, we immediately realized that semantic gravity in blue was upside down. And we explicitly asked her where she had placed semantic gravity plus plus and semantic gravity minus minus. And she confirmed that she had done the other way. So what we did was correcting semantic gravity, and that this would be her analysis of her lesson, being semantic gravity in blue and semantic density red. Okay, so as a comment to highlight, Juana said, I don't know if I was expecting like a wave, as you mentioned in the last meeting. And I discovered that this is more like a diente de sierra. I don't know how to say that in English. Yeah, like a sawtooth. All right, so she was a bit concerned that she had not obtained waves, but in fact, what she does is going up and down, represented a bit differently. But we were very happy to see that compared with our analysis, this is our analysis. We divided her lecture in 3 parts, and the analysis she has done corresponds very much with this part where she's teaching the most relevant content, the core content of the lesson. The similarities, we were happy to see that both of us, Juana and ourselves, used all the range from semantic gravity plus plus, semantic density minus minus to semantic gravity minus minus, semantic density plus plus, and that we had obtained similar results. Here you have some examples. Of course, it is very difficult to choose examples for you to see where all the movements come from in the transcript, but we selected some for you to have an idea of how we coded the lectures. In the first case, semantic gravity plus semantic density minus is giving an example of networks working in our system in the university. So she's referring to a network that is working around, let's say, and she's not speaking about how they work in depth. In the second example, semantic gravity plus plus semantic density minus minus, she's referring to an object she has in the classroom, a cable, more specifically, and she's speaking about it. So it's easy to follow what she's saying and very grounded. And by the end of the class, she's defining a concept, network layers, and how they are going to call them in the future. So this for you to have an idea of how we coded their lectures.
Irina, can I ask?
Yes, sure.
Can I ask something very briefly? All these examples are coming from the teachers' lectures. Is there any student response parts? Because those are also affecting SG minus plus, and ST. So how did you code it?
It is all comes from their lectures. The only thing to mention that I forgot to say is that they are teaching in Spanish. So these examples have been translated for you to understand the content, but there are no interventions from the students or whatever.
No, I mean, teacher asks questions, student response. There are not those kind of such just lecture part. Okay.
It is just lecture.
All right. Yeah.
In fact, the students in these chunks, they chose, I had not realized, but I can tell you now that they chose parts where only they are speaking. Students do not intervene. They do not ask questions. They just speak, which is very common in our context, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks to you. So finally, we wanted to show you this Cartesian plane. It is a drawing. It is not systematic at all, but we wanted to, I had the need to represent somehow more graphically on a figure what Juana was doing. So she was moving very much or staying very much in the rhizomatic code, which makes sense because she's teaching students in the third year of engineering, but not our engineering. So she also moved to prosaic codes with her very grounded examples or rarefied codes when she gave examples, but a bit more abstract, or more worldly when she was speaking about procedures or how to do things. So this is just an idea of what Juana did, represented by myself. All right. The second case is Nico.
But before you go any further, Irina, can I just, I mean, you may be talking about this later, so I'm asking if you are talking about it later, about the experience of these lecturers doing it. How did they feel? Did they take to it? Did they find it alienating? Did they find it useful? Are you going to talk about that later on?
We are going to give a summary. Yes.
Excellent.
It's going to, of course, this is what they did, and our idea is to reach conclusions about how they worked. And yes, but we have a lot of that because we have been speaking about this for hours and hours. Yes.
Excellent. Because while I'm at the moment, I'm just about to finish, hopefully, finally, after about 5 years of writing this book, introducing LCT properly. And I'm surprised by how many times I use the word empowering about LCT, about what it's for. So it's not just for analyzing stuff, it's actually for empowering people to analyze stuff.
Of course.
Yeah.
But well, we tried to capture some comments by our teachers, but at this stage, the comments are more connected with the analysis itself. The ones we are bringing here today. Later on, Tom is going to speak a bit more about what is behind all that. All right. So thank you very much. So in the case of Nico, what we see here is that the first thing he did was preparing a translation device. I have not translated it, but it's quite recognizable, the work, I think. Semantic gravity, he said grado de abstraction degree, then semantic gravity minus would be abstract concept, semantic gravity plus concrete concept. And on the right, instead of specific examples from his transcript, he relates what is semantic gravity minus for him and what is semantic gravity plus. Minus would be laws, theorems, then formulae, then graphs, then simulations, then reality. And the same for semantic density, which he called grado complexity degree. As you can see, he situated semantic density again as in the case of Juana, but in this case with semantic density the other way around. But I translated for you this last part because Nico says, semantic gravity, I am unable to differentiate which parts are semantic gravity plus, minus, and minus. So I will limit myself to marking 3 levels on a scale: concrete, neutral, and abstract. For semantic density, I will also use 3 levels: simple, neutral, and complex. This is his process, yes, trying to think how he's going to analyze. In the case of Nico connected these pieces of the transcript in full content units or in sentences, and he analyzed them using abstraction and complexity: concrete, simple. Nico did not obtain his semantic waves, but he this is a second comment by Nico, important in our view. From my point of view, it's rather flat, everything. So I cannot move from high levels of abstraction to concrete examples. So when I say concrete and I say abstract, I'm moving, well, in the range is very small. So I decided between concrete and abstract. It's very difficult for me. So whenever I talked about Kirchhoff law, or for instance, or Ohm's law, I call it abstract. And whatever I point to the blackboard or to the electronic board, I say it's concrete. Sometimes here, for example, I say concrete while dealing with high complexity. So I think this is strong semantic gravity along with strong semantic density. So we see a lot of his thinking process when analyzing. And again, we were happy to see that his analysis coincides a lot with ours. We saw semantic density very flat, in fact, but what was going up and down from we also used only 2 levels because it was really difficult to find more than 2 levels. And what was going up and down was abstraction, in fact, semantic gravity. Nico was a bit disappointed because he had not obtained waves, which was for them sort of a challenge, something they had to reach. But he was a bit happier when he saw my drawing, and we explained them that him and the rest that in fact he was moving from a rhizomatic code to a wordly code which again makes sense. He's with students in the first year. So he's teaching them how to resolve circuits, which would be the wordly part, but they are in the university, they have to learn the laws behind these steps or this process. So he's very much moving from the rhizomatic to the wordly and back, which is, in other words, what he explained us in our meeting. And finally, Ruben, this is his translation device. I'm going to copy his own explanation of this because it is really dense itself. Ruben did a lot of work. In fact, this is the 16. If you pay attention to the note, it is page 15 out of 16. So he worked for 16 pages coding. And so this is his translation device. It is in 4 columns. And as you can see in the column, the colors are marking the degrees of difficulty, of complexity, density, or gravity. Again, he copied his transcript and analyzed it. But again, you can see 4 columns. The ones for semantic gravity and semantic density are the 2 on the right. And the other 2 are the representations of the concept, which we are going to see explained in his own words. Ruben says, I started by trying to translate the concepts of density and gravity to words that I am more used to. So again, I translated gravity into abstraction and density to complexity. Then I revised the transcription of my lecture, and I began by highlighting here the concepts bold. And while I was doing this and going through the lecture, I realized that it was not only the concepts that were important, it was also important the way to represent those concepts. So I began also taking notes about the way I had to represent the concept. So the two columns on the, let's say his translation device, the two columns on the left are the degrees of from 1 to 4 of density or gravity, the representations of the concept, which is a bit complex. That's the reason why we have 4 columns in his analysis, for the concepts and 2 for the representation of those concepts. And he goes on. After making the list, I ordered the concepts by abstraction, which is the green column, and complexity, which is the purple column. 1 means the lower abstraction level, and 5, the higher abstraction level. And for complexity, the same scale. 1 is the lowest, and 5 is the highest. I should say that these categories, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, were not decided a priori. So I translated it to my own words, density and gravity, but I made no a priori decision about the number of levels. It was only afterwards, after ordering the concepts, that I came out with these 5 levels in both cases. Our analysis for Ruben is he moving in very high levels of semantic density and semantic gravity. The parts where you only see 1 line is because they are overlapping, semantic gravity and semantic density. He spoke about 5 levels. We only saw or represented it in 3 because we never used semantic gravity plus semantic density minus. Again, he's teaching master students. They are supposed to be knowledgeable about all these engineering terms, concepts. They have the culture of engineering. So Ruben is moving is very much in the highest degrees of density and gravity. He was happy to see, he agreed with our analysis, and in fact recognized the 2 parts of his lectures, being the cat in column number 14 here. And the representation for Ruben in the Cartesian plane would be something like he's very much in the rhizomatic code, and sometimes moving to a prosaic code, giving 1 example, 2 examples, something in the classroom. He refers to a column in the classroom at some point, or other examples a bit more abstract, connected with his teaching to ground his explanation of very difficult concepts. So now we are moving on to appropriation, to what we get from here. And if you don't mind, we are going to take 2 seconds for Tom to take control of the sharing the screen. And in the meanwhile, I don't know if you have any other question while he's preparing his.
Okay, can everyone see the screen? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so we wondered about what was going on here. We had these 3 different lecturers with Juana seemed to be quite faithful to the LCT concepts and the LCT language, and to apply it in a way which she took to it quite quickly. Whereas Nico, he talked a little bit, he referred at times in our recorded meeting to your beautiful theory, and having some problems with the terminology and wanting to adapt it to use his own terminology. So he seemed to kind of distance himself a little bit from it, even though he was using it in ways which we think were quite appropriate. Whereas Ruben, the last case, was changing it in some ways. This idea of separating the content, and from the way he represented the content, I couldn't really get my head around that, and still can't really, whether he should kind of integrate those things more and just use the LCT framework as we presented it. So years and years ago, I was interested in this sociocultural concept of appropriation, which comes from Bakhtin, from Vygotsky and James Wersch, and I hadn't looked at it really for a long time, so I decided to kind of go back to it and see if that could help us to think about how these 3 lecturers took up the LCT ideas. So most people who look at appropriation will be familiar with this quote from Bakhtin, that the word in language is half someone else's. It only becomes your own when you can fill it with your own intentions, your own purposes. So if you're hearing about LCT, it's Irina's words, it's Tom's words, it's the books you read, it's Carmaton's words, etc. So how can you make this your own in some way? And it's a sociocultural theory. It comes from basically Russian or Soviet cultural historical theory. So Leontev is a process that has as its end result the individual's reproduction. That's quite important. It's a social context, but it's the individual who reproduces or carries out or is able to use certain behaviors, certain tools, certain concepts. And a study that I found interesting years and years ago is a more pedagogical application. It's Grossman, Smagorinsky, and Valencia's quite well-known study with English teachers. And they talk about it being a process through which a person adopts pedagogical tools. So in a way, we're presenting LCT as a kind of pedagogical tool, and we're interested in the way these lecturers internalize these tools and use them. And Grossman and Smagorinsky and Valencia came up with this idea of levels of appropriation. So on a first step, we thought maybe we could look at these lectures in terms of their levels of appropriation. So we can go from not appropriating LCT at all. I just can't do it. It's too difficult. I'm just not going to do it. Someone might appropriate a label and say, okay, semantic density, that's quite interesting, but not really understand what it's about. Yeah. They might be able to appropriate perhaps some surface features. For example, a lecturer might say, yes, that's a very technical word, so it's high semantic density. But they don't really have the conceptual underpinning of semantic density in terms of the integratedness of concepts, perhaps constellations. That's what they may have if they do have the conceptual underpinnings. And the top level is mastery, so that the person is able to use this tool for their own purposes within their own activities. Okay. That looks fine as far as it goes, although Wers pointed out that you can have mastery without appropriation. Like someone can be able to use the tool, but they don't really take it in. They don't really see it as something that's meaningful for their own purposes. So we look for something. We found perhaps labeling our lectures on a ladder of levels, not to be the best way to work with them. So we look for more recent updating of appropriation. And we found this interesting paper by Matsushima in Mathematics Education, which reconsiders appropriation and takes it into more to the domain of a learning community and the dialogue in a learning community, and how we as a learning community, Irina, myself, and the three lecturers, work with the LCT concepts. So it's a rather complicated model, but I think if we go through it step by step, hopefully it makes sense. So we are the learning community, 3 engineering lecturers, 2 applied linguists. They are introduced to this conventionalized and socially negotiated use of LCT concepts, which has already been conventionalized because we're presenting them hopefully, the way they are conventionalized within the LCT community, okay? So take one learner, for example, our lecturer, Nico. The first step of appropriation will be his own unreflective response and imitative use of LCT concepts, okay? You hear about it and you kind of imitate what you're hearing about and you try to apply it. Through reflection, this lecturer may be able to have his own personal meanings for the LCT concepts under use. That may be okay if it just stays there within the lecturer's own individual understanding. But of course, Mr. Shima talks about publication. So this dialogue, openly talking about it in the community, makes it public, makes it individual and public. So, and the rest of us may respond critically to what Nico says about his understanding of the LCT concepts, or we may be more accepting of it. And so the process is that the community comes to have its own negotiated use of these concepts. So we might then take on the idea of you can somehow split the content from the representation, or you may think, okay, Nico's 3 levels might work better than the 4 levels. And of course, this goes on for each member of the community, okay? Irina or me in this case. From this, Mr. Shima identifies 6 features of appropriation. This individual sense-making he calls dynamic composition. this group sense dialogue and publication and talking about it together. He calls it mutual composition. He mentions constraints and deviations. Each will understand LCT concepts in part strongly influenced by their own history, their own past. So these engineering lecturers will have their own ways of understanding what they mean by abstraction, by complexity, and that will influence quite strongly how they take on or take in these concepts. Of course, we have to try to understand what each other are thinking and carry out our own reflective thinking. The ideas can be taken on in more or less appropriate ways, according to Matsushima, so it can be more purposeful and more effective in terms of dealing with problems and issues in one's own practice. And deviation is not necessarily a bad thing. There can be new and creative uses of these concepts through deviation. So we kind of took the liberty to kind of steal an LCT practice, in terms of trying to map these three lecturers. We came up with a 4 quadrants with a Cartesian plane, which is not an LCT one. It's a sociocultural one, to help us to try to translate Matsushima's ideas and try to map these 3 lecturers. So we thought one way to do that would be to look at deviation. You can have more or less deviation from the tool that's been presented, the LCT Semantics tool. And we can have more or less appropriateness. So we are trying to keep Matsushima's concepts and use them in each of the 4 quadrants. So if you have a lot of deviation in ways which are actually quite helpful and quite productive, this could be kind of like creative appropriation. It can yield insights. It moves away from the standard, but yields insights. If we have quite strong deviation, but it may be less effective or not seem to work so well in the activity, maybe quite idiosyncratic, we call that, and these are terms that are in Mr. Shima's paper, we call that refractive. If we have less deviation, and it's used in ways which seem to be productive for the practice, for analyzing the practice, and perhaps later on adapting the practice, we call that conventionalized. And if we have a lot of deviation in ways which we can't really see what the use or meaning or purpose might be, we use the concept of imitative. So very, very tentatively and provisionally.
Tom, can I just ask what you mean by deviation? Because all LCT concepts are recontextualized when used.
Yeah, deviation is a concept that comes from Matsushima's consideration of appropriation. So you have this conventionalized set of concepts or tools that people are presented with. That original work is within mathematics education. So teachers are teaching some mathematics concept, and a group of learners working with it. Some individuals may start to deviate or move away from that mathematical concept.
Can you kind of give me an example of what you mean in LCT, for example? So like, what would be a deviation from semantic gravity, for example?
Okay, well, deviation is when we look at Ruben. Okay, we'll put him on the map. When Ruben uses a translation device which has 4 columns, which has 2 columns for the content, semantic gravity, semantic density, and 2 columns for what he calls representation of the content. And this might be kind of a misunderstanding between Ruben and me, or Ruben and Irina, or it may be that he is doing something that is not actually the way. I mean, my instinct is that it would probably be better as we work together to kind of reintegrate what Ruben is doing here, and just to use a translation device which looks at which uses semantic density and semantic gravity without doing this split between content and representation.
Well, you could do the split and have 2 translation devices, but the thing here is, why is that deviation at all? Because that's not deviation from any concept of semantic gravity. That's in the translation device, which is always a creative enactment within a recontextualized space. So I don't see the deviation.
Yeah, I saw a deviation there. In fact, the idea of deviation in this kind of like in terms of appropriation is when members of the learning community, whatever the tool is, the set of concepts that you're trying to present to them or work and use with them. So if I'm working with any set of teachers and I'm working with semantic density, semantic gravity, or any other LCT concept, individual members, lecturers, teachers, colleagues, people I'm working with, for example, myself sometimes in conversations about semantic gravity, semantic density, sometimes we think, you're talking about semantic gravity, you're using the term semantic gravity here, but I think we're actually talking about density. Yeah. So or you're calling this density, or you're calling this gravity, but it actually is not the way that we think about this in the LCT community or in the little community that we're working with.
So I think, yeah, it would help clarify maybe another time, because we may not have time for this, but it helped me understand this better, I think, if we could figure out, because deviation would slide all over the place in the way I'm thinking from, like, there are concepts, because you think about the language of LCT, there's concepts like semantic gravity, which is just a very small definition of context dependence of practices. That's it. And then you have translation devices, which are designed for deviation effectively in terms of recontextualization. And so, like, we'd need to be talking about, is this a redefining of a concept as they're defined as a concept like semantic gravity, semantic density, or is it a creative recontextualization through a translation device or through a method or something like that? And I just think the word deviation sounds wrong to me, because none of that would be, every time someone uses semantic gravity, that you're doing it in a creative way. And all of those would be deviations, but it doesn't seem like deviation from some conventionalized standard to me, because it's kind of part of the LCT framework. I'm kind of confused as to where deviation would come in, unless it's like just misusing a concept, like someone saying this is semantic, the complexity of this is semantic gravity, which is simply just misusing the wrong word. That's not deviation, really, is it?
Well, deviation kind of negative connotations in general in society, you know. So a deviant or someone who deviates from something.
I teach the sociology of deviance. Yes.
Yeah. So that, and this is the but I mean,
if I can jump in just 1 minute, I'm not going to take more. We saw I don't know if you want to call it the deviation or whatever, but there is something different Ruben does as well, which is when he analyzes his transcript, he does not analyze how he transmits the concepts, but the concepts themselves. He classifies the concepts from high to low in 5 levels. So every time he mentions one concept, it doesn't matter how he presents the concept. He classifies it immediately as high or low. So he does not only he separates how he represents the concept, but he separates how he speaks about the concept. So what we have, so he moves from what we told them to do, which is analyzing the content unit as a whole. He separates it in 3 parts. The concept, he never speaks about how he transmits it, and he analyzes in parallel how he represents it. And we do not either agree in the representation of complexity in the representations. So for us, what he does is moves away from what we told them to do, really.
Right. Yeah. So that's not deviation from LCT. I think what's maybe useful here would be to actually call this deviation from existing studies of using LCT, because I don't see any deviation from LCT in that. They'll be like, that's an interesting use, but I mean, maybe deviation from existing uses of LCT. There's a very strong distinction I make between the explanatory framework of LCT and empirical studies using LCT. And I think you're talking about deviation from existing studies using LCT when you're talking
Probably.
about that.
And in fact, as Tom was saying, we don't see it as something negative. In fact,
No.
it gives opportunities to study. He's speaking about multimodality.
Yeah.
I mean,
aren't your example, as Carl said earlier, isn't it about two different translation devices? It's field of production versus field of recontextualization or field of reproduction. The one of his columns is coding the knowledge itself, as it were, and then one of his columns is coding the recontextualization of that knowledge in pedagogy. So he's simply realizing that there are two things going on, but is maybe not able to articulate what it is he's doing.
That's it.
And that would be something that, Jim, I mean, we can think about this in terms of like LCT publications and the LCT community in general, but we can also think about deviation in terms of the little learning community that we are, you know, Irina and myself and the three lecturers, okay? And Irina and I, for better or worse, have our own ideas about what LCT is and what it's for, okay? Which
I think that's the way forward,
may not
Tom,
deviate
with your
from
ideas.
published work.
I think that's the way forward with this idea then is if you lock down what deviation is from. So, I mean, we have to do this with LCT all the time because
for whatever you are presenting in the learning community.
So we have to do this all the time. We have to lock down LCT concepts. We have to lock down the baseline for semantic gravity or lock down the boundaries in autonomy and call it target. So I think, it'd be really helpful for this idea of yours to think about, okay, so if we just lock down deviation, because when I was listening to it, I was thinking, okay, I hear about 20 possible definitions for deviation from something. Some of which I don't think it's deviation from, and some think I do. So if you kind of lock it down to say deviation from what they've learned from us or established studies or whatever, I think that makes a lot of sense. If you say deviation from LCT, I would argue against that all day long, because I think there's nothing deviating here. I think this is all awesome. It's really
important to clarify that, it's not actually deviation from LCT. And to add a note from Mitsushima's paper, we can't go into it, but he talks about the big difference between participants in learning when they articulate their thinking in the group and when they just keep silent and listen to other people. And what happens, he shows with quite complicated examples, that those who just listen, they increasingly deviate from what is the community's kind of root or goal. He's talking about mathematics education. So there's this process which he kind of sets out in quite a lot of detail that you just get further, you can get further and further away. If you're in a group of people doing LCT and you're not sharing or publishing, as he says, your own developing understanding of what you're doing, that's going to contribute more to the learning community, negotiating a set of shared practices, which may be, for example, developing together a translation device. But if you're sitting there and you're kind of thinking about it and listening to other people, there's a possibility that your understanding may start to kind of veer off in other directions, which may or may not be productive for the activity that you're involved in and which you may later on want to change or do something about.
No, I think this, I'm not arguing. I think this is really interesting. I just think if we could just be really clear about, but just a little clearer about the from, the deviation from. And I think what Irina said was like really clear, which is, and you said it as well, which is like from what we presented to them as being a kind of conventional understanding and conventional usage, these are deviations. And I think that makes perfect sense. What kind of like I reacted to was thinking, none of this is deviation from LCT as I would present it. So like, this is all brilliant because I think it's the wonderful creative enactment of LCT, which is the lifeblood of generating all these really wonderful new ideas. Some of them work, some of them don't. But that's where we get the kind of, that's the cutting edge of evolution, as it were. That's where we get the feedback from all these wonderful ways in which creative people are doing creative things. So I think that's great. Yeah.
And we are so grateful for the three of them. Really, yes.
Yeah. And I think you're both right to say deviation is not a bad thing, you know, because that can be a really good thing as well.
In fact, we want some deviation. And also there's the possibility that when you are grappling with a new concept of concepts that you want to use later on to actually apply to your practices, you might kind of work your way around this in certain ways. You might start off being quite imitative because an expert has told you that this is this is the best thing since sliced bread, so I'm going to use it. But you haven't really put into it properly. You haven't made it meaningful for your own purposes. And you may then start using it in ways which are quite idiosyncratic, but not bad, okay? And then you might end up being more not getting into the creative sphere at all, but becoming more conventionalized and settling on a more group understanding of what this is. And this is something I feel that I'm working with other colleagues that we are trying to work. So I'm working with a lecturer in molecular pharmacology at the moment, and we're trying to work on a translation device for semantic gravity. And we are grappling with it. I'm grappling what it means, what it means to her, for something to be stronger, have stronger semantic gravity in talking about ligands and antagonists and things like that. So we eventually do come to some kind of more conventionalized tool that we can use together. But
so before I ask Paul to just jump in, I'll just share something before I forget it, which is that when I was working with groups doing this stuff for translation devices, you get into this big discussion, you get into your own head, and you become too intellectualist. And what I would often do is to go, right, without thinking, I want an answer. Is this stronger or weaker? And he goes around the room, like stronger, 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 stronger. I'm like, okay, we all know this is stronger. We have no clue why. Let's try and figure it out. Because often, I call it cut by gut. Often we know that something is stronger or weaker on an organizing principle, but we get in our own way trying to figure out how. And that discussion of why we think it's really interesting. But yeah, Paul had something he wanted to ask.
So I was just going to say, I mean, I think well, first of all, I really like this, and it feels like exactly it's describing a process I went through, partly with Jane, partly then talking to Carl, partly on my own. But one of the things over what you were saying, I think it's right, you've got to do it with a frame of reference of what you've taught, because LCT is too massive. If you talk about the whole of LCT, I'm still trying to get my head around the whole of LCT. Years and years later, I've sort of got almost my head around semantics after doing lots in it and even publishing in it and teaching people it. But if you limit it to the small bit of exactly what you taught, that makes a lot of sense to me, because that is the sort of thing you are going through appropriating. And I did not exactly, the very similar things to what they did when I've been teaching it to teachers. I got rid of semantic density and semantic gravity. I just switched to hard to understand and easy to understand. And that was something we found helped teachers pick it up, because it doesn't matter really whether it's exactly LCT or whether it's something slightly different. That it allows them to pick it up and use it, which seems to be exactly what you're talking about. That's giving people a way of appropriating it. And if they want to get back to exactly the terminology that is LCT, then that's fine. They can do that, but you don't need that to use it. And so it depends whether you're trying to pick it up as a research tool or something to do in practice. And, it's probably everything's there in LCT because it's so massive. Somebody has thought about it. It's flexible. It's designed for exactly this sort of thing. So, but it's really, really useful what you're doing, which is thinking about appropriation from the little bit we've just taught you, because that's how you get hold of the thing and have any chance whatsoever of doing anything with it, is kind of what it feels to me.
Yeah, it's also a bit kind of, for example, this Nico, we felt quite happy, to be honest, with what he was doing, even though he was a bit sniffy about the whole thing, about the terminology, about your beautiful theory, a bit sarcastic about it. But he was worried about. He ended up being worried about the flatness of his teaching. He said, "Okay, I just don't move very much. It's very." So he'd used the tools in ways which allowed him to reflect on his teaching, and possibly, because we're still working with him, to maybe do something about it, which is the important thing at the end. Along with Ruben, it was more like, maybe if he goes down that route, it's not going to help very much. Yeah. So maybe we should kind of all get together and say, well, maybe I don't rule out that it being very productive, what he's doing with this kind of separation that Steve just brought up. mean, it might be possible to shift him along towards the right a bit, and it's actually a creative and productive use of the tool. But we all have our own instincts about these things, about whether this is going to take you down a road that's going to lead to more development for you, or whether it's going to be more productive. And these are all calls that we have to make as well when we're involved in academic development. I don't know if we need to have it's just a kind of a conclusions slide, but I think we've done all the conclusions, so I don't know.
Well, that's really, really interesting, guys. Thank you. Zoom clap of silence. Thanks, that's really interesting. I love, I know there's a bunch of people here who work with academic staff or teachers or even students as well, using the ideas to different degrees of explicitness or tacitness, or and often I remember talking with Irina not so long ago about the way in which teachers, I think secondary school teachers, were using ideas for analysing their own teaching, and discussing with her about how really the important thing is not whether, like, they did an analysis that if you gave the data to me would be the same, but more that they did an analysis that enabled them to see what they were doing and to mindfully change what they wanted to change.
Yeah.
And I think that's really sort of, very important, is that they're empowering educators or practitioners with tools that they can use to get from A to B, depending on how they want to do that. And then hopefully some of them write this stuff up and they can feed back into the intellectual community as well.
I agree. I was going to say the same thing. I think that it doesn't really matter what, I mean, the fact that they're being able to think about what they're doing and talk about it with each other, and then maybe decide to change things, or decide that what they're doing is exactly what they want to be doing is, I mean, it is empowering for a teacher to, feel like they can understand what's going on in their classroom. So I think that's really cool. I'm going to have to go, but I just wanted to say thank you. This was really, really great.
Thanks, Vera. I was thinking about this recently. I was trying to explain LCT to a non-academic. I was doing a very bad job, because the problem of being at the end of writing 130,000 at least word book is I can't see the wood for the trees. And but they'd encountered educational theories before. And I was saying, no, it's nothing like that, because it's not about telling educators what to do. It's more about trying to empower them with tools to enable them to do something. And I think that's what you're showing here, really interestingly, and showing how, like, you presented a particular set of ideas, and then they've kind of gone off in productive and sometimes unproductive ways, and I think that's really interesting to see. There's going to be pathways around that to try and figure out what is, what may be characteristic or signature pathways of useful innovation. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for us, the most interesting or important thing is that we found a common language to speak about our teaching.
Yeah,
and that's
also by the way, I think that you're also doing a version of autonomy, funnily enough, in the deviation appropriateness thing. It's like, if you think about contents and purposes, it's pretty much a recontextualization of that, in a way, which is the degree of changing of the contents and the degree of changing of the purposes. And then what you're going to see is signature pathways around the autonomy plane that are productive for innovation or not. So it's not that it's redundant what you're doing, it's more that this is like a fine-grained version of you don't even realize that, but often this happens without us realizing, is that you've got a wonderful recontextualized version of the autonomy plane for the notion of how people take ideas and play with them, So you can take those ideas that you've come up with and plug it back into that wider discussion that there will be as autonomy grows more and more.
So thank you for the idea.
Thank you. Yeah.
Jen raised her hand. Yeah, just jump in, Jen.
Oh, yes, yeah, from South Africa. Sorry about the lack of video for most of it. I've got unstable internet. So, but just to say, like, not only does what I so like about LCT is not only does it empower you for research or for analyzing whatever you happen to be analyzing, but it also then empowers you to become better at whatever you're doing, to go, so for me to become a better teacher because I can see it in terms of like the ways of framing it in LCT. Yeah.
I completely agree with that. And I think that's what Tom and Irina are doing really well here. And so many other people who are here this week are doing really well, which is empowering people by providing them the tools that they can play with and use. And I think that's really, really important. I think that no educational theory has worked because they all have a tendency to tell you what to do in a one-fits-all way, which never works.
Yeah.
And also, by the way, is incredibly condescending and is the undermining of the professional pace of teaching, which then allows people to come along and say, oh, well, parents can do this. So, I trust teachers and their professional judgment. I think that that's what you guys are doing as well. It's like, here's some more tools to try and figure out how to use, if they're useful. They may not be useful, and they don't need to use them.
And I do see what Tom and Irina were saying about with their refractive quadrant, that there is the possibility, I see the danger for myself of sort of not communicating with the group of people and going off on your own thing down some rabbit hole that you're never going to get out of, and it not being a useful way, of using that. And that's where something like being able to talk and share like this does make sure that you get more into that creative quadrant.
I agree with that as well. And I think one of the things is that sometimes the really creative people can do that. And that's the problem. It's not like arrogance or something. It's just creativity. And then you go off into your own. I know from the last 25 years, 27 years, no, hang on, 29 years. Oh my God, I'm so old. Last 29 years of doing LCT is that one of the hard things has been having to keep going back and forward to not just go off onto new ideas all the time, but have to keep explaining the old ones better and better, and to keep coming back to a community that's developing and saying, what are you making of it all? Because I don't go off and fucking lose myself, It's so easy to do that. Yeah, I think this is really interesting, guys. Thanks, Tom and Irina. I think this is really great.
Can I ask
go for it. Yeah.
Just a quick reflective question. I want, do you, because what's really impressive with this, the whole thing is impressive. I love it. And it was very semantically dense. I'm going to have to go away and think about this for weeks. But the fact that the engineering lecturers that you worked with were able to give it this much time, plot things onto Excel spreadsheets and so on. Do you think that there's any kind of interaction between the discipline and the sort of the semantic coding of the lecturers and their capacity to do things like this? If you'd gone in and worked with a bunch of history lecturers, my guess is that they wouldn't have taken an Excel spreadsheet, plotted everything, intuitively given things a value 1 to 4. You must have done an amazing job anyway, Tom, to kind of translate LCT in a way that then had people creating their own translation devices and so on. But is there something about a scientific mindset? I don't want to be kind of normative or anything, but is there something about the discipline itself that helped, because you were working with engineering, did it work in a way, in a particular way that might have been different if you were working with history or classics lecturers, for example?
I think
before Irina answers that, I just want to mention that in the session we did with them, we showed them, we used the word by Dorling et al. on engineering, and we used example translation devices from other engineering LCT work as examples, and we went through them in quite a lot of detail, different levels of semantic gravity and density. But yeah, Irina works with the engineers much more closely in her institution, so maybe you can answer.
Yes, I think there are two different aspects here. The first one is that, in fact, I think, and they think, that there is a specific engineering culture. And they say this themselves. They can do anything they are asked to do. They are here to solve problems. So you ask them to do whatever, and they will do. And they will do their best. The tools they use, of course, are very related to, I mean, they use Excel's words, and they draw in the waves, and I mean, so they are very able to use all these tools. And the second aspect is that we chose teachers that are really concerned with their teaching. So if we asked the same other teachers to do this or to follow the same process, we probably wouldn't have had that answer. So it depends on their culture and the person itself, yes, the lecturer, or how interested they are in learning and observing and reflecting, and that's more personal.
Mm. And can I just, from a personal perspective, I'm interested. So as linguists with kind of linguistic work that cuts across departments, how does that sit with any other academic development work that's going on within the university? Are you considered academic developers, or is the academic development unit separate in the university? And how far do you have autonomy to go in and do interventions like this, academic development interventions, if you're linguists and separate from academic development? How is that thought of?
No, we are separate. Our department, I mean, we teach students communication skills. That's basically our work. So these sort of interventions are particular interests of, okay. I mean, different colleagues do different things in, I don't know, in ESP, in multimodality, in whatever.
But does your institution have a staff development unit?
No, it doesn't. Okay. No. Well, yeah, there is a specific department that proposes programs, development programs in different technical or more personal development, or they offer courses. But these sort of interventions on teaching and the like are sort of particular of the different researchers or teachers, or myself in this case. I learned about LCT from Tom, so and from that moment I've had a lot of opportunities, because it opened me. I can communicate more. I can do more things with the engineers, thanks to LCT.
Mm.
And thanks to Tom, who presented it to me.
We originally were interested in this because of the English medium instruction, because we're working together recruiting lecturers for a small research project and I wanted to use LCT to try to bring together this idea of medium of instruction and knowledge building. But then with Irina and conversations with your colleagues, it went well beyond the English medium, the medium. In fact, these teachers are teaching. One of them teaches in English, I think, Juana, but we're interested in the pedagogy in this. We're not concerned so much with the medium of instruction issue here at all.
Well, I think I love work that's practical, and I love hearing about work with people who are practitioners and educators. It's great. So thanks, guys, for that, and thank you for everyone for sticking around. So it was like that interesting. Loads of people didn't want to leave, and then people stayed around for quite a lot of discussion afterwards as well. So thank you very much. This is really interesting stuff.
Thank you, everyone.